The night was filled with a sound Ramon had never heard before, a deafening roar as if the ocean itself had risen to devour the land. He held his young daughter's trembling hand tightly, shielding her small frame against his chest as the winds howled like angry spirits. The typhoon showed no mercy. Sheets of rain blurred his vision, but he could still see the water rushing into their small coastal home, tearing away the walls, sweeping away everything they had built. His fishing boat, their only source of livelihood, splintered into pieces before his eyes. Each crash of the waves felt like a final blow, stripping away not just wood and stone, but years of dreams, memories, and sacrifices. Ramon tried to stay strong for his daughter, whispering promises of safety he wasn't sure he could keep. The darkness was thick, filled with the cries of neighbors, the snapping of trees, and the unrelenting force of nature. By the time dawn arrived, silence returned, but it was a silence heavy with loss. Their home was gone, reduced to broken planks scattered across the sand. The boat was nowhere to be found, and the small belongings they once held dear had been carried away by the sea. Ramon stood barefoot in the ruins, his daughter clinging to him, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. He felt stripped of everything, powerless against the vastness of the storm. For the first time in his life, the fisherman who once battled the sea now felt completely defeated by it. Ramon sat on a broken piece of wood that used to be part of their home, staring blankly at the gray horizon. Days had passed since the typhoon, yet the destruction around him felt just as raw as the night it struck. The air still smelled of salt and damp earth, a constant reminder of what had been taken. His daughter sat quietly beside him, her stomach growling softly. She did not complain, but her silence spoke louder than words. Ramon could feel the weight of his failure pressing down on him. Once, he had been a proud fisherman, rising with the sun to provide for his family. Now, he was a father with nothing to give. They found scraps of food, sometimes a handful of rice, sometimes only rainwater collected in a tin. At night, they huddled under a half-broken roof, the wind slipping through the cracks and chilling their bones. Ramon wrapped his arms around his daughter, pretending it was enough to keep her warm. Inside, he felt a storm of his own, a mixture of grief, shame, and helplessness. He avoided the eyes of his neighbors, many of whom were suffering just as he was. Every day, he searched the shoreline for something salvageable, some sign of hope left behind by the sea, but the sand only offered shards of what once was. His heart ached most when his daughter asked if things would ever be the same again. Ramon had no answer. He only tightened his grip on her hand, praying silently for a miracle. On the fifth morning after the storm, the quiet of the village was broken by the rumble of engines. A small convoy of aid trucks rolled slowly along the muddy road, splashing through puddles and stopping where the ruins of homes still stood. Curious faces appeared from doorways and broken shelters, eyes weary yet sparked with a fragile hope. Ramon lifted his daughter into his arms, watching as strangers in bright vests stepped down, carrying boxes of food, blankets, and medicine. He had expected nothing more than a bag of rice or a few bottles of water, but then something unexpected happened. One young volunteer, her face tired yet kind, noticed Ramon struggling to hold his daughter steady. She approached gently, kneeling so she was eye level with the little girl. With a warm smile, she offered food, but more than that, she listened. She asked Ramon about his boat, about their home, and about how they were surviving. No one had asked before, everyone else had been too busy surviving themselves. When she saw the girl shivering, the volunteer didn't hesitate. She slipped off her own jacket and wrapped it carefully around her shoulders. The gesture was small, yet it pierced through Ramon's despair like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time since the storm, he felt seen, not just as another victim, but as a father, as a human being. In that simple act of kindness, something stirred inside him, a flicker of strength, a reminder that even in ruins, compassion could still build hope. Ramon rose before sunrise the next day, the sound of hammers and voices stirring in the village. The volunteers had returned, unloading wood, nails, and tarps to rebuild homes. For a moment he hesitated, unsure if he belonged among them. He had grown used to the heaviness of loss, the weight of waiting for help. But then his daughter tugged at his sleeve, her eyes glancing at the people working together. Something in her look reminded him of the strength he once carried, the strength the storm had tried to wash away. Without a word, he stepped forward. At first, his hands shook as he lifted a beam, his body still weak from hunger and grief. But as the hours passed, muscle memory returned. He hammered nails, carried supplies, and offered a steady hand to his neighbors. The same hands that once pulled nets from the sea were now lifting walls and sheltering families. For the first time since the typhoon, Ramon didn't feel powerless. He felt useful again. The young volunteer who had given her jacket to his daughter noticed him. She smiled as he worked, and her encouragement fueled his determination. Soon, Ramon wasn't just helping rebuild his own shelter, he was guiding others, comforting the elderly, and cheering the children who laughed despite the rubble around them. By evening, his daughter ran into his arms, pointing proudly at the small shelter they had raised together. Ramon held her close, his chest swelling not with sorrow but with a quiet, fierce pride. Kindness had rekindled a fire in him he thought was gone forever. Months passed, and the once broken village began to breathe again. New homes stood where ruins had been, walls painted in bright colors that defied the gray memories of the storm. Children ran barefoot through the streets, their laughter echoing louder than the waves that once brought destruction. Ramon's hands, rough from work, no longer trembled with despair. Instead, they carried tools, food, and comfort to others in need. When another nearby community was struck by heavy rains and flooding, Ramon did not hesitate. He gathered what little his village could spare, rice, clothing, blankets, and led a group to deliver them. His daughter walked beside him, proud to see her father once again standing tall, not as a man who had lost everything, but as someone who had found new purpose through kindness. In that other village, Ramon repeated the same act that once saved him. He listened to the stories of the broken, shared food with empty hands, and placed his own jacket over a shivering child. As he did, he realized something profound: the storm had stripped away his possessions, but it had also cleared a space in his heart for something greater. That night, under a starlit sky, he whispered to his daughter, "The sea took everything from us, but kindness gave us back more than we ever imagined." She leaned against him, smiling softly, her small hand clutching his. And in that quiet moment, Ramon knew the truth: homes could be rebuilt with wood and stone, but lives were rebuilt with compassion.